I'm going to introduce Dr. Ronald Day. He's a senior vice president at the Fortune Society. For those of you who don't know the Fortune Society, it's based in New York City. It operates with an annual budget of $79 million. The budget primarily funds an extensive range of services for individuals involved in the criminal justice system, including reentry, planning, housing assistance, education, and job training. I have had the pleasure to volunteer when I was in New York a few times. It's a powerful organization and it keeps growing. Dr. Day himself holds a Ph.D. from the City University of New York Graduate Center, John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and a master's in public administration from Baruch College. And he was formerly incarcerated himself. It is my honor to have personally met him, when I went to New York a couple of weeks ago and listened to him. We had a great talk. And I'm sure after hearing him speak today, you will say it is your honor too. Without further ado, Dr. Ronald Day.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be involved in this conference. And thank you, Neil, Mark, and team for asking me to be a part of this process. And so excited for what you all are doing. So I want to talk a little bit about Fortune. Neil, mentioned us, and I want to get obviously to some of the specific work that Fortune does. Before I do that, I'm gonna just tell you a little bit about who I am. So again, Ronald was my name. I'm a 55-year-old African-American male, grew up in the South Bronx, and got involved in negativity in the community, and then ended up being persuaded by a lot of the bad things that was happening, and ultimately decided to drop out of high school. And once I did, I was heavily engaged in illegal drug activity, and one thing led to another. I started carrying guns, and then I was arrested for 3 different charges. I was arrested for weapons possession, drug charges, and then also attempted murder charge. And I ended up going to prison with a sentence of 15 to 45 years. And when I went to prison, I had a GED that I was able to earn because miracles happen. So I ended up signing up for college while I was there, and the college prison program, the budget was ended during that time, so I didn't get a chance to finish my college degree while I was inside. But I came home in 2007, and I was able to re-enroll in college, and I was in college from 2008 until 2018. Finished an undergraduate degree, finished a master's degree in public administration, and then finished a PhD in 7 years. So now a lot of people at the job, of course, call me Dr. Ronald Day. And so that's my story. I worked full time. Once I came home, wanted to pursue as much education as I possibly could, and talk to people about the importance of education, the importance of us giving back to the community after having been involved in the system. So a little bit about Fortune. Fortune has been around since 1967, providing services exclusively to people who've been involved in the system. All right, we have our main service center is in Long Island City, and we have offices in every borough except Staten Island. And we're one of the organizations that is known to have the most robust services, not just in New York City, but around the country. We offer education services. We offer robust employment services. We offer alternatives to incarceration. We have court advocates in the court. We have we do ATI. We have folks go into the jails and try to get people a non-custodial sentence. Ultimately, we have treatment services. So we do substance use and domestic violence, mental health services. We have creative arts programs. So again, very robust services. And one of the more important services also is housing. All right, we have housing in 4 of the 5 boroughs. And again, we have offices in 4 of the 5 boroughs. The only borough we don't have a office is Staten Island at the time. So, that's the services that we offer, in addition to offering services, we have a policy center because we say we can't service our way out of the conundrum that we find ourselves in with mass incarceration. All right. So our responsibility is to try to remove a lot of the barriers and impediments that people face as they are entangled in the criminal legal system, whether it's at the beginning of the system, going through arrest and might possibly be in jail, or if they're coming home from incarceration or in the reentry process. We serve people across the spectrum. We have individuals who have served no time, and we work with people who just come home from serving 40 years, 45 years in prison. So you could imagine how challenging it is for some of those individuals who are making that particular transition. So that's the work we do in the David Rothenberg Center for Public Policy. So, look us up, fortunesociety.org. You'll see the work that we do. We just passed or helped pass a bill in New York City that is designed to remove barriers to housing, fair chance in housing bill. We also did something recently with some of the other organizations here. We passed something called Clean Slate. So that was really important. That the objective of Clean Slate is to seal convictions so that as individuals look for employment, as they look for housing, as they look for educational opportunities, their record won't act as an impediment. And you know how it is, employees are like, oh, we don't want to hire you because you have a record. So we're super excited that Clean Slate just went into effect actually last week. So we're doing a lot of work on the policy front. And we also have we also have a research center, right? Is called the Center for Research, Inquiry, and Social Justice. And what we do in the research center is we have some pretty dynamic projects. And we're trying to, in addition to provide services and advocacy, we also are trying to do a deeper dive, talk to the participants that we serve, and we serve 14,000 people a year at Fortune, try to understand how the transition is going for them, try to understand how we can be more supportive of them, and no matter what service it is that they're interested in. And with us, we say there's no wrong door to entry. If a person is interested in the services that Fortune offers, we don't even need them to be referred necessarily. Although we get referrals from probation and parole and all these organizations, they don't even need to get a referral. We say, come to the organization at 9 o'clock in the morning, show up, and you'll end up in our intake department, and they will refer you to the services that you need, benefits access. We try to connect people to primary physicians, primary healthcare physicians. So we have a center where we do that. So all of those things are really important. Another thing that we do, another service work that we're doing in the research center, is we're trying to really change the paradigm around how we look at people who've been involved in the system. So the way that we do it now is, a lot of us have probably heard of the term recidivism. All right, if I ask you right now, raise your hand. Have you heard of recidivism? Probably 90% of the folks in the room, and I see arms going up. That's because as a society, that's what we do. We talk about recidivism. And I've told this to Neil and others. A colleague of ours, Jeremy Travis, who used to be the president of John Jay College, and he was at Arnold Ventures for some time as the senior vice president. He talks about how we worship at the altar of recidivism. And so we're saying at Fortune Society, and we're saying that to some of our sister agencies, is that we need to move away from using recidivism as like the sole metric. And if folks are saying that, oh, this is how we measure success, we look at recidivism rates. First of all, for everyone's information, recidivism is a measure of failure. It's not a measure of success. So you can't really turn it around and say, well, we're looking at recidivism. That's how we're going to measure the success of the people who've been impacted by the system. No, actually, that's not how things work. All right. So recidivism is an event-focused measure that documents additional points of interaction with the criminal legal system. That's what it is. All right. So, and what is recidivism? It's reconvictions, it's rearrest, is reincarcerations, it's all of these points of the system that are about a person re-engaging with the system. Revocations in New York State, I'll just give you a quick statistic. In New York State, we have a recidivism rate that's about 40%. And over the years, that hasn't really changed. I mean, it's gone down a little bit since the pandemic, and our prison population has been going down as well. But the number used to be that about 30 something percent of people, when they went back inside for a new commitment, right? A new crime. Nowadays, in New York State, as it is in many other states, people don't often go back for new commitments. They go back for what are referred to as technical parole violations. So right now, it's been flipped upside down. So our recidivism rate is, not 40%, a little less than that. But the majority of the folks who go back have been going back for technical parole violations. So that's why we passed something in New York called less is more, because that's designed to reduce the chances that people will end up back in prison for a technical parole violation. So I want to talk about a what's called desistance. Now, raise your hand if you've heard the term desistance. My guess is that fewer hands are going to go up now. All right, so it's just as I imagined. So we're trying to move towards desistance because we believe that this is the model that we should be focusing on. So what desistance is about tracking whether or not people have desisted from engaging in criminal behavior, and looking at how people, the way that we're defining it, is how people have been able to successfully navigate many of the pitfalls that people have in front of them as they transition from jail or prison to the community. So it's about looking at success. Sometimes success is hard to measure. I was involved in a study done by the National Academies of Science, Engineer, and Medicine, and we grappled with the issue of success. And we said, you know what, instead of looking at success, we said, let's look at what we think is something that's we can measure better, and that's well-being. And so we put out a report, and I suggest that you all go take a look at it. Neil, you can put it in the chat, or Mark. It's called The Limits of Recidivism, Measuring Success After Prison. And so we said, focus on desistance and other metrics that give us a much better sense about what people's experiences have been during incarceration and what they have been able to do as they traverse and re-entered community, and how, what their well-being is. And I'll just give you another example. Just because someone didn't recidivate, it doesn't mean that they are not involved in criminal behavior, correct? Because you could have someone who just hasn't been apprehended or what have you, they could still be engaging in criminal behavior. Just as you could have someone who basically desisted from crime, they're not engaging in criminal behavior at all, but they end up back in the system. Why? Because there's a technical parole violation. Oh, I was out past my curfew. Or, oh, I was out. I ended up having to move or transition to another location without getting my parole officer's permission. I went to another jurisdiction to purchase something, and I was out of the space where I'm supposed to be. So you have a lot of reasons that people end up going back inside that have nothing to do with crime. So what we're saying is that we need to move away from that, and we need to focus on metrics like desistance, and focusing on, how is it that they're doing in their transition. So desistance recognizes setbacks and may count less severe offenses as markers of progress. Because if I was committing crimes for years, and then I come home and, like, I'm selling Lucy's or something like that. I mean, come on now. It might be considered a crime or a violation in some areas, but we're talking about you're not out there slinging cocaine or heroin or something like that, carrying guns and like that. Desistance involves personal and social changes, including stronger relationships, stable work, and identity shifts. So sometimes, in order for people to desist from crime, they need to have these identity shifts, like I did. When I was in prison, I did a lot of reading. There were a lot of individuals who were inside who wanted to make sure that I was on the right track. So those things matter to me. And sometimes somebody might say, well, prison must not be too bad because look what happened with you. And I say, don't look at what happened with me as a measure of what has happened with people that are in the criminal legal system. There's a quote in the book called, I think it's a 500 Years of Imprisonment by a guy named Scott Christensen. And he talks about, when he was in the prison in California, he talked about rehabilitation. And on the wall, it says something pretty profound. It said, few people are ever rehabilitated in prison. Fewer still are rehabilitated by prison. Yet some rehabilitate themselves in spite of prison. And so I look at myself as someone who was rehabilitated, but I was rehabilitated because the men who were inside took me under their wing and they said, this individual has a good head on the shoulders and we're gonna make sure he's on the right track. If it was up to the prison, then I'd be in bad shape. So just to kind of close, desistance also considers structural factors such as access to employment opportunities, housing stability, healthcare, educational resources. All of these pieces support people in their transition, right, either from jail or prison to the community. And it's not the flip side of recidivism, because oftentimes when we do recidivism studies, we don't really know what happened with individuals. All we know is that they ended up back in jail or ended up back in prison. And I'm saying, and we say at Fortune, that we have to do better.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Day. I appreciate your powerful presentation. As we await the questions to come through, I'd like to ask,
Yes.
how difficult has it been to navigate the different relationships, to change policy and mindsets to minimize those barriers for those folks that are coming out? So what are some of the challenges that you've had to face and fight for and fight through to help minimize some of these barriers that we see, whether it's voting, whether it's employment, housing, and different things of that nature?
I think one of the biggest challenges that we as a society oftentimes the pendulum swings from one direction to the next based upon politics. So you have a situation where people make it seem that crime is really crazy in certain communities, and it's not. And none of us, Fortunate Society, we consider ourselves a public safety organization as well, right? We're not the police or law enforcement, but we want our communities to be safe. But you'll have people come and say, "Oh, these communities are bad. The crime is high." And it's like crime has been going down over the years. It's like significantly down. When I was in prison in 1992, 1993, we had 72,000 people in prison in New York State. We're half that now. We're below 30-something thousand people. So what does that have to do? It has to do with crime going down. And so we have to make sure that we're not persuaded by moral panics, right? You have incidents that happen, right? We just had a gentleman stab 3 people the other day. I mean, that is horrible for something like that to happen. Individuals likely have mental health issues. And, we close down our mental health institutions to a large extent. So the challenge is that sometimes we're not being truthful about what is happening in the community. And we're not willing to put the resources where they should go. The resources should go into our education. We should not have, for example, the New York City Department of Corrections with a $1.2 billion budget, right? With 5,000 or 6,000 correction officers with a ratio of 1-to-1, one incarcerated person for 1 correction officer. I mean, it's kind of insane, but that's what we're up against right now. That is a part of the challenge that we face.
Yeah. What are some of your goals in terms of your organization, some of your future goals? Because I was having this conversation in the breakout room earlier. I think we're going to see a more heightened focus on more incarcerating more individuals here soon. And I think it's important that we're having this conference now in this present time and developing more partnerships. But what are some of the goals that your organization will have to try to help curb, like when politics change and different folks are in certain positions, how do you keep your staff engaged and your clients to make sure that they're staying on point and doing what they need to do so they won't end up back in the system based on policy or politics?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. So one of the things that we do at Fortune is we believe in collaborations, right? We know that we can't do this on our own. We know that we need strong partnerships throughout the work to be able to really make some headway, because if we were doing this alone, we'd be in real trouble. And at Fortune, we have, something as an example called the Policy Center Collective, where we allow for staff, for example, no matter what role they're in, they could be a facilities worker, they could be a residential aide, but we have them in our Policy Center Collective because they might want to know more about the policy work that's happening. They might want to be involved in the advocacy that we're doing, because we believe that, it takes a village, right? And if we've done harm to our community, and I say, deprecated my community by engaging in criminal behavior, I have a responsibility to give back. But the least I could do is to not be a part of the problem. So that's what we're encouraging people to do, to be a part of the solution. Like, if you're not out there doing advocacy, you're not out there going with us to Albany or to city council or what have you. If you're just coming to work and going home and taking care of your family and being a responsible citizen, then that's a really good start. Because at some point you might decide, I want to really be engaged. And then that is going to help us, because the more people that we have engaged, I think the better off we're going to be.
Yeah, thank you. I had a couple of quick questions. So glad you brought up dissidence. How would you, in one word, or how would you convey that concept?
The one word is really hard.
Oh, not one. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
not one word. I'm sorry, that
Okay.
was not the question. Go ahead.
Yes.
How would you describe it?
I mean, desistance is a measure of people desisting from crime, not continuing to be involved in criminal activity, and us trying to find out what those factors are. What are the things that influence people to disengage from criminal activity?
Okay. And how would you describe the success of the Fortune's Society?
I mean, Fortune has been around since 1967. So, think about that. Our founder, David Rothenberg, is still on 99.5 WBAI every Saturday. David was, when the organization was very small, for everyone's information, all we were was a very small advocacy organization. And when the Attica Rebellion happened, September 9th of 1971, and the men in the prison took over the prison, one of the individuals that they asked for, because they believed that Fortune was doing good work, is they said, we want David Rothenberg here. And so when the governor's people called David Rothenberg, they said, would you come to the prison? The men are asking for you to be one of the observers. And he said, absolutely. He said, but the only way I will come is, he said, I'm a white Jewish man. He said, I have an African-American man, another man who were incarcerated and did a lot of time. They're the ones who need to come along with me. And the governor's people said, absolutely. So he took two individuals with him. So, that's a testament to that's a part of Fortune's legacy, that, we were, David Rothenberg was there in the yard, in D yard, before all of the ruckus, the craziness started to happen. So the Fortune has been around. Look us up. I would just tell people to look us up if you're interested in volunteering. We have employment opportunities as well. If you want to work for Fortune Society, look us up, because we're always interested in partnerships.
Okay. And I think the last question is, what are some key measures of desistance that can lead to long-term success?
So one metric that's related is what we've been talking about. So you think about education. So some people say, well, the more education you get, the less likely you are to recidivate. And that's true, but we don't know what the mechanisms are that were responsible for the person not recidivating. When you do a desistance study, you look at, what is it, Dr. Hendrick, that motivated you? What was it about education that actually helped you? Like, was it the cognitive shift? what was it that the social change, the associating with pro-social individuals, whatever, what was it? So I think that's the difference between the recidivism and the desistance. So when we say, you know, what are the metrics, we're saying it's education often, it's you know, it's employment, it's housing. All of these pieces are related to desistance, but you do have to dig deeper to find out what was it about the housing, what was it about the education, what was it about the employment, you know, because we say quickly about employment that it's not the job alone that supports people with desisting from crime. It's actually the people that you associate with at the job that helps you. It's that you are making a livable wage and that you have benefits. All of these things help people desist from crime.
Okay. And there's one more question. I know we're out of time, so I'm going to pass it back over to Neil. But if you can look in the chat,
Yes,
Dr. Day, and
absolutely.
answer that last question. But thank you
Absolutely.
again, sir. And
thank you for your work, Dr. Hendricks. We appreciate it.
thank you.